What do you think that becoming a dad has taught you about the masculine?
I think that aggression is so awesome, but it does need to be socialized.
There's a nothingness there, but yet he's there. There's someone there already.
Feel this sense of like there's like kind of tears in the back of my eyes. There's like a heaviness in my chest.
Awesome. I am here today with one of my favorite dads, Guy. Guy, will you introduce yourself?
My name's Guy Sengstock. I'm a great dad, and I have some wisdom I want to share with you.
Yeah, awesome. You were just saying that you're excited about this conversation. What are you excited about the conversation?
You know, it's interesting because it's an excitement that kind of comes with like a recognition or a realization or an insight, right? Of what I do for a living, what I've been doing for a living, since I was in my early 20s, has been dialogical practices, right? And circling, I was one of the main founders of circling, which is like really caught and is practiced everywhere. So, and I teach it, and like I teach people how to circle. So I've probably paid more attention to dialogical relations, right? Relationships, and thought about that more than like I probably ever even dreamed of wanting to, right? What was really interesting is that invited me to come talk about being a dad, I realized like I've had very few conversations directly about fatherhood and what it is to father, right? What it is to be a father. And that really struck me. That really struck me because especially given how like important this is, right?
Right.
For my sons, for me, for the future world, it's up there with probably one of the most important things. Yet to consider like all the talk about relationship that I've done, very little of it has been focused on that. The insight about that is I think about that in a couple of ways. And on one level, I think, oh, that we don't talk about this, right, is a problem, right? On one level. And I think that's really true. It also expresses something about fatherhood and about parenting, right? That I think it harkens to the implicitness, right, of being a father, right? In other words, someone once said, I don't remember who it was, someone once said, that parenting is that thing that happens when you're not thinking about parenting.
Yeah, yeah. There's an Italian author, Umberto Eco, who said specifically about men, he is like, what we become as men, like what we become has to do with what our fathers taught us when they weren't trying to teach us anything.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
those moments, like we actually really learn so much. And when you flip that back around, the impact that being a parent, in particular being a dad, because you could argue we're pretty secondary or tertiary to the whole process. I mean, it can't happen without us,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
2 minutes later, we're not needed in any particular way biologically, and yet we as a society, we're involved, especially in the Western society. We have marriage, and we're raising children in a like a monogamous sort of way.
Yeah.
How is it that there is not more depth of conversation around that, which is really the whole what hit me and why I wanted to start this project. And you and I are people that do talk a lot about a lot of things that matter, and yet
Yeah.
somehow that fathering isn't really a big part of it. So what would it be like for us to just talk about it? And so,
Especially given that conversation is one of the main ways that wisdom is passed along, right?
so you have two sons. So tell me about your kids.
So I have a 22-year-old boy. His name's Forrest, and I have a
Boy,
four.
22-year-old boy.
Yeah,
He's a
Oh
boy, huh?
man, he's actually a man now.
He's a
Yes,
fucking man. Yes, he is.
he really is.
Yeah.
He really is. And a 4-year-old boy named Teague.
Yeah.
Teague Orion Sengstock.
Mm.
And so
So
I have a
eight,
I have a
18
whole
years,
yep,
like
I have a
18 year
whole 18
separation.
years with one, and then we started again when I was,
Wow.
had a kid basically when I was 50.
Okay. Crazy. So let's pull this to apart. And what was it? What was it like for you? What did it mean to you to become a dad when Forrest was born? What was that
Yeah.
like? And then now with Teague.
Well, I think the relationship with uh my ex-wife had a lot to do with it, obviously, right? However, I would say with Forrest, I remember the moment he was born, and you could kind of see him. What I wasn't expecting, right, but I really felt was like it's like there's a him, like right away. There's like a nature or something. It's really difficult to put that into words because actually
Hmm.
they're like an amoeba, right? Like
Hmm.
they're
Hmm.
they're literally like the most useless, helpless, dependent thing in the universe at that age, right? At 0.
I just thought about like you met your son before he ever took his first breath. Like
Yeah,
that's an interesting. Like you're
yeah,
right. There's a nothingness there, but yet
yeah,
he's there. There's someone there
yeah,
already.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like a hum. It's like a certain hum, right? Like it's like he's just Forrest. Like I felt that the moment I could see him with my eyes.
Hmm.
And also the birth was, man, the first time I went through that birth process, like I'd never seen or been, in a birth process before. And I got so much respect, right, for like a woman's ability to go through that, right? Like there was a certain point where she was in the tub, right, like in the water, and she's just like this. She's like, hmm, hmm, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, I really got this sense of like that is other right there. She is other in the most profound sense. Like I really got that that's something I will never ever experience.
Right.
And it was like a deep respect for whatever that was, right? Like this relationship to pain for the sake of something, giving birth to it. Like there was something really, really not me, right, but her. And I think that gave me a ton of respect, right, for her and for the birth process. And like I felt like I was through that whole birth, I was like, and somehow like have a almost a pious service. I was like called, like anything you need, but like this also this awareness that there's something there that like I will never experience.
And there's like no equivalent
Yeah,
as a man.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, totally, totally.
What
And
about when Teague was born? What was true for you around that?
well, we ended up doing a C-section, so it was like a little bit different. However, and he had some issues, so he was taken to intensive care and like held there
Mm.
for about a week. We were with him about a week, and it was interesting. It's kind of the same thing. Like there's there's a hum to him, right? And whatever that is just so it's mysterious to me in a way that's like draws me into it, right? Like I wonder about it. It brings a lot of wonder to me. And in some sense, there's this experience often with Teague, and it happened also with Forrest, right? Where I just find myself like gazing at him, like in this, it's kind of like at some level, like gazing at him and going like, okay, wait a minute. There was like this whole period you didn't exist. And now here you are sitting there looking at me, trying to talk about this letter that he's infatuated with, right? Like, it's like there's something about that that's just like, my mind can't comprehend. And I notice I dwell in that relationship with him a lot. Like it's almost like, so, there's that way when you have a fire outside going, right? You can't not look at the fire.
So, of all the things that you're fascinated by, and there's so many things you're fascinated by,
Mhm.
how do you explain the fascination of just being able to look at like a child and just
Yeah,
not even
yeah,
have thought, like to
yeah,
be just experiencing it? How do you
yeah.
explain that?
Right, right. Well, it's like I said to Brienne the other day, because we often find ourselves just sitting doing that together. I mean, Brienne has this ecstatic relationship with him. Like she's in wonder. Literally, I'd say like 65, 75% of the time, she's in a state of wonder, right? About
Yeah.
with Teague. And we were looking at him, watching him learn how to swim, which he's learning how to swim his own way, right? Like we tried doing lessons and stuff like that, and he just is not into anything he's supposed to do. So he's figured this out, and he can do it forever, and he just giggles the whole time, right, in the water. And we're just both looking at this, and I said something like, "Yeah, it's really, really difficult to be an atheist and behold and look at Teague." I think
Yeah,
that
you're reminding me like when after Livy was born and then Tammy and I didn't have a television. We just sit around. We just watch baby TV. You just sit there. It
yeah,
was more entertaining than anything I ever saw in programming, and kind of nothing's happening. That's the other part. It's so hard to
yeah,
wrap my head around what I was even watching.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. What's special about that relationship is that we have a relationship to when they weren't, right? We have there's a whole world that they weren't, and so you're looking at them, and there, in some sense, I think there's this way that not right, that
Hmm.
nothing, right, it being a parent, especially, I think this could probably happen with anything. It ought to happen with most things, right? Where there's this open nothing that we see first, and then their face emerges out of it, right? Giggling or talking or whatever it is. And there's just a mystery there that's so compelling and
Hmm.
so evocative of, I would say, some of the best parts of ourselves. It's definitely some of the best parts of me, right? It evokes, wonder, playfulness, right?
Hmm.
A deep felt sense of meaning, um, incredible things. Yeah.
As you were saying that, the idea that you were in relationship with both your kids before they were born, but also, there's it made me think of like there's the baby will come into the world either through your intention, like let's have a baby, let's try to have a baby,
Yeah.
or oh shit, we're pregnant. How did that happen? So the idea that they emerge kind of either way and
Hmm.
how much your intention has to do with it is an interesting sort of
Yeah.
consideration.
Yeah. It's kind of like I could want a boy, but I couldn't want Teague, right?
Yeah.
So much of being a father with him is in some sense like, and this is kind of natural too. It's like in some sense is really catching, noticing his uniqueness, his particular, singularity in the sense that just he can't not be, and then
Hmm.
talking about it with Brienne. We talk, like, most of our conversations are talking about this kind of little being that's
Hmm.
emerging,
Hmm.
and how peculiar he is, and making connections with like how I was when I was a kid, and the similarities are really haunting at times.
Mm.
And that was the same thing with Forrest, right? And
Hmm.
and I think that's something about parenthood that probably is pretty natural, right? Is in some sense there's a midwifing an agent, right, into being, right? A
Hmm.
sovereign person into being, right? Like that's uh and I think that has so much to do with kind of noting their uniqueness and being struck by it and bringing it to language and pointing it out and relating to it and beholding it. Yeah,
When Tammy was pregnant with Olivia, I was 100% convinced we were gonna have a boy. Like, not even like I think or I want, I knew it. And then Olivia's born. I was like, I mean, I didn't have sisters. I didn't know. And I was like, shit, I have a girl. I have no idea how to be a dad to a girl. And
yeah,
then, and then I became, a girl dad. And then when she was pregnant with Leo, I was like, oh, we're definitely having another girl. And then he's born. I was like, I don't have the first idea how to be a dad to a boy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then you do. And so a lot of it is one of the things that I would love to explore is this idea of like our ideas about fatherhood came from. Like
Yeah,
before we became a dad, the
yeah,
thought I had, and there's going to be an inexplicable connection between our dads and who we become as
yeah,
dads.
yeah.
And so, like, what are your thoughts in terms of where your ideas about fatherhood came from and connection
Hmm,
to your dad, relationship with your dad? Like, what's that?
hmm.
What was all that like?
That's a big question. That's a big question.
We have time.
Um, well, first of all, I mean, first of all, I want to say it's like my dad's really. I find my dad to be an extraordinary human being. Like he's quite bright. He's really articulate, and he's super funny. And he's
Mm,
always been that way. And I think he has this huge heart, right, that expresses itself. Like he's a recovering alcoholic. He got sober when I was 12, so he's like, I don't know, he's been sober for years and years and years, and really dove deep into Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And there's something about sharing and sponsoring people that really hit a sweet spot for my dad. And so he
mm.
really became someone in service, right? And he is like, I hear all the time that people encountering him change their life. So I would say that, like, first of all, my dad probably, when he got sober, that was probably the greatest gift anybody gave me, right? Was
What
his
was it
sobriety.
like before?
He grew up in a alcoholic, violent environment. He had two older brothers, and the mother was the one that was abusive,
Mm,
and the father just kind of like melted into the background, right? And the mother, and I always got this sense that something about my dad really had her target him,
mm,
um, and I sense that there was like a level of abuse that involved a lot of humiliation, right? Like
mm.
I think he had two older brothers, and those I noticed with my uncles, those relationships have been pretty complicated, right? Because I think there's a lot of looking up to them, but also, you know, a jealousy of them. There's something around that, and I would just imagine that being beaten by his mother um, had an element of like deep humiliation, right? And so I would say that he out of that definitely like had these kind of narcissistic, you know, tendencies. Like he had I think a lot of narcissistic rage. And what I mean by that is like if I'm not mirrored right by the other in the way that I need you to see me, right? Um I experience rage. right? And so growing up, my dad was he was he was he was like rage was like just around the corner at any second. All right. I used to remember when I was like in fourth grade and he came home. I could tell what kind of mood he was in
Mm.
based on how he pulled into the driveway. Like some level of vigilance and attention was always on him, because if there was like, how I like to put it, it's like if there was anything that possibly could maybe insinuate at some level that he was wrong, he would attack. And so there was a lot of this experience of being like it would be a moment where he's there, we're talking, and then something hits him, and he goes away, and someone else shows up, and it's like this, and it has nothing but malevolence for you. And
Mhm.
so there would be, lots of experiences of like him, screaming at me, asking me questions, right? And being in this fucking place where I remember that, like, you were fucked if you answered the question, right? And you were fucked if you didn't answer the question, right? And he
Mhm.
was super smart. So he'd have these
Yeah.
elaborate, like, ways of kind of, you know,
Trapping you.
trapping you, right?
Hmm.
And and then if like and then I would cry, and the crying would make it worse, and like he was not physically abusive with me,
Hmm.
but it was
Hmm.
that was really present. He was physically abusive with my mom.
Hmm.
um Most of this is when he was drinking, right? He would go into a rage with my mother, right? And my mother, I think, would become his mother, right?
Right.
and and I think he would just, in that state, he would deck her and pull her fingers back, and like
Oh, Jesus.
this, like all kinds of things. And
Mm.
I was in a position of kind of trying to mediate that. I remember trying to like time my cry, right, as they were doing that, because I would get this sense where I could kind of tell, like, he'd get so escalated, right, as he's hitting her or beating her or doing whatever, that he's going to kill her. Like, it kind of get that sense, and then I would like do something that would cry, or and they'd stop
Hmm.
and kind of
Distract.
weirdly come and console me, and like then go back out and do it again. Um, so there
Wow.
was a lot of, there was that. It's funny that I've been thinking a lot lately about that turn, right, where it's like he's gone and someone else is there, right? That look in his eyes, it's like that moment is this, at least for me, was this experience of like a crack in, like a crack in being. Like,
Hmm.
it felt like yeah, that was a crack in the source of my existence, right?
Yeah.
In a big way.
And you had an experience of like two completely different people, like a total Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it was kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah, having that experience of just this completely different personality. I mean, it's such an interesting, reference. So we all know what Jekyll and Hyde and it's literature, but when you think about it, it's like that's actually not that extraordinary of a psychological condition. Like it's
Yeah.
something like alcohol could easily trigger that, or
Yeah.
stress or anxiety or anything in general. And so,
Absolutely.
dude, that sounds terrifying to
Hmm.
grow up in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you said you got sober when you were 12. So what led to that?
Basically, my what happened was my mom. We owned a family business. My grandfather's from Germany. He's a he was apprenticed to be a tailor. Like, so he was really a tailor. And then he moved to Chicago and started Hoff Cleaners. Right, so it's like a family business. It had an enormous reputation. Like, Chuck Comiskey used to take his, fly his clothes in there, and my, grandpa would tailor make suits, and is this whole, deep family thing. And then my parents bought it in the 80s, and they basically, I mean, I think that business was clearing $500,000 a year, um, cash, and in the middle of it, and this is the 80s, so Coke is like the thing, right? There was always, it's like my mom had her Coke, my dad had his Coke, and then they had their Coke, right? It was like, and it was, she they used to use this, these plastic trays that you get from like TV dinners, and they were just all over the house with little piles of Coke and stuff.
Wow.
That was just,
Did you
yeah,
did you
yeah.
as a kid understand what that was?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
It just was like, it was just part of one of the features of my life. It never really registered to me
Mm.
that they did drugs, right?
Hmm.
Um, so basically, my what happened was, my dad, like a year into owning the business, just decided to leave, and he went to Second City, and he was gonna be a comedian. Second City is,
Yeah.
has a lot to do, I think, with Saturday Night Live and stuff
Uh-huh.
like that. So
Uh-huh.
he's really funny. And so he jumped into that, but he didn't even talk to my mom about it. He just like, this is what I'm going to do. And she ended up with the whole thing in her lap. And then he goes off, he he goes off to do a circuit, right? And travels all around the United States and Canada and all this kind of stuff.
No
Didn't
way.
consult her or anything like that,
Oh
right?
my God.
So as you can imagine, my mom was quite pissed,
Hmm.
and so she got a little crazy about that. And so she basically had this mythology, you could say, in her imagination, that when she got a bill in the mail, um, she had this garbage bag in the attic, and if she took that bill and she put it in the attic, in the garbage thing, it didn't exist. So
Okay.
4 years later, right, and I remember this day like a Christ. It was like, I can remember everything about this day, because the phone rings. Billie Jean was played on the radio. That was, Billie Jean's
Yeah.
1982, I think.
Uh-huh.
Right. I just remember that song was on. Right. My dad answers the phone, and I hear this, which is common, that, like, hey, fucking, da, 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 and he hangs up. Right. So this is 4 years. Right. Um, and he calls my mom downstairs, and he says, Carol, that was the IRS. And if what they're saying is actually true, I will kill you. Right? And I was, and you could feel that it was like a crack that just went through everything. And my mom is totally like terrified, right? And then we go off to this like family vacation thing for that weekend. And essentially they get back, we get back. My mom, my mom, where she's talking to me about like moving to California and getting away from my dad, and it got so fucking crazy, right? Um, and so in all of that, that was like the opening, right, for them going into recovery, and it wasn't that long after that that my mom went to a treatment center. And then after the treatment center, and she got out, and my dad started going to meetings and getting sober, and they realized that they probably couldn't stay sober in Chicago, so we moved to where a friend was in Cottonwood, Arizona. And that move, right, was so. I look back at that now, and that move out of Chicago to Arizona was so painfully transformative for me
Mm.
as a kid, right? the one safe spot in the universe was with my grandfather. I had an amazing relationship with my grandfather.
Mm.
I think my grandpa kind of sensed what was happening, and he just him and my grandma just kind of poured themselves into me. So I spent a lot of time with him, and I think a lot of fathering took place through my grandfather, right? And so I had no language for this at the time, but leaving Chicago meant leaving like the only safe spot in the universe. And there's only one thing that's worse than an active drinking alcoholic. It's a sober one, right? So it's like I'm in the car with the two of them,
Oh
and
my
they're
God.
just, I would have these experiences. I would feel so. It's funny. It's not now. I understand it to be what I was experiencing was existential anxiety, and it
Mm.
would overtake me, and I would just start crying, and I couldn't
Right.
explain why. And
Right.
I never felt safe with my parents to reveal myself. Right.
Wow.
So I just really bottled that up. But inside, I kind of developed, I would say, this obsessive compulsive kind of repetitive thinking that would start to happen. And I think now about that, and I think what I was doing was my being was kind of like creating a cognitive raft, right?
Hmm.
Like, and to kind of keep me afloat, and it would be these repetitive thoughts and these fears and all. It was very intricate. And then we moved to Arizona, and in Arizona, uh, I distinctively, they got really involved in AA,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I remember there was this day where I think that they were either having a meeting on our porch, or they were just a bunch of their AA friends were over talking, and tuning into that conversation that they were having. And I would say it was like, I think what I saw was the first conversation that wasn't about, like, it wasn't idle talk, right?
Mm.
It wasn't about like what we're going to do, and who should do it, and how should we do it, and who has it, and this is what I have, and right, that idle talk,
Mm-hmm.
right? And instead I experienced people disclosing themselves and then responding to that disclosure, right? And it's really interesting because it's like I distinctly remember that was a different universe. That wasn't just a change. What they were doing was a that was a different dimension,
Mm-hmm.
right? That they were opening up. And
Huh.
I would feel this, it's interesting because I felt that, this bottom dropping out sensation in my solar plexus, right? I could feel that, and then I could feel the tone of what I was seeing in that conversation, and I felt that they were connected in some way.
Right.
And I was like, all right. And I just turned towards and I joined them, and I basically haven't come out
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
40 years.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, two things. I mean, so much about that, Jesus. But one, I'm imagining the inquisitive kid that you were. You were also like, must have gone like, huh, this must be how they talk in Arizona versus how they talk in Chicago,
Yeah.
right? Something
Right.
like
Right.
your mind's trying to make sense of what the fuck is different, and
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
it's where we live. So all of that, like this, we started with like, okay, we are raised in a particular way, we have a particular upbringing, and then we wind up sitting in the position of being that, doing the upbringing. And
Yeah.
what came through in all that for you? What
Yeah.
decisions
Yeah.
did you
Yeah.
make? Like, how did you show up, and what did you bring into being a dad?
Yeah. The first time with Forrest, I remember saying a lot like, I don't feel like I know what to do regarding being a father, but I feel like I know what not to do,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Like,
Yeah.
And I remember kind of consciously thinking about, yeah, if we just don't shame him, right? If we just don't make him wrong and shame him, like discipline him, right? Like hold boundaries. But by shame, I mean like I say something to you or I insinuate like something fundamental about your being, right, is wrong
Mm.
or disturbed or not good, right? And I thought I just had this sense like, I guess just from my own experience that I would imagine like if you just don't do that, right? Something good will come out of that, right? Like they'll just probably become a person,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
On their own. So I would say that that was my conscious kind of attitude, and the way that I talked about it was was that sense of like making sure not doing a lot of things and responding really different,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? That's what
Yeah.
I would say was
Yeah.
like at the beginning was really fundamental for me.
All right. So then nature versus nurture. Big, as
Yeah,
a like you can have thoughts about it and then you raise kids. And then when you raise kids, you're
yeah,
like, now you have actual like evidence, not a gigantic pool of evidence, but
yeah,
you watch it. So in your
yeah,
experience, and it's a little early with Teague, maybe not, but like you
yeah,
certainly have seen the entire growth of
yeah.
Forrest. What's your belief on that? That like how much of it is nature, how much of it is nurture? What do you get to do, not do?
Totally. I've been thinking about that a lot. I would say before being a father, I put a lot on nurture, right? Like I was like in a big way. I really thought like most of it is about nurture. Now having been a father,
Mm-hmm.
I feel almost the opposite. Yeah, there's a hymn, right, that's going to unfold, and there's that I can relate to that, right? And how I relate to that matters big time, right? Like however there's something fundamental is like not is in some senses none of my business, right? In a
Mm,
certain way.
mm,
And it's more about bringing that out, right? Like really like thinking about I think that's my orientation is like really getting his uniqueness into the world,
mm-hmm.
right? Which is when we think about the world, right? Like basically, and I think this is one of the big differences between mothering and fathering is that I noticed for me, I want to make it as hard as possible for him.
Mm. Say more
And
about that.
so, for example, he's teaching himself how to swim, right? And we've given him swim lessons that he doesn't want to like. He don't want to do any of this. So he's out there. He's out there, and it grabbed him. Right? It was a challenge. Right? It was a challenge. He had a lot of fear about what is something going on with water, and it was a challenge. But then there was this point where I noticed, oh, he's after it. Like it's
Mm,
inspiring to him. He's like wanting to practice. He's wanting to challenge himself, right? And he's pushing into more, right? And that seeing that was I just felt like I felt euphoric because I think at some level being able to desire to do hard things, right? Or enjoy doing hard things, I think is kind of like a lot of what being a father is. The mother obviously has a lot more about nurturing and security, right? And like, her response was like, yeah, that's great, but just make sure you're watching them,
mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Um, and so there's an impulse in me, and even when we're wrestling and playing, right? There's always this way where I he's doing this naturally, but I really want to tend to pushing the limit, right? Like finding something he's interested in and like feeling him reach for it, like want it, right? And it's difficult to do it, and he's got to like fall down and get back up, right? That, to me, I think for a man, right, is essentially the world. That's how we go out into the world, right? The world is an enormous challenge, and there's a reality to it. I have an intention, and the world just doesn't go, okay, here you go, right?
Yeah, if it does, you're like,
Yeah,
I'm not interested in that. Yep.
yeah.
hmm
In my sense,
So like
yeah, my
in,
sense is like that's it. That's at the core of being a father, right?
so I'm going to relate that to, David Dataism around
Yeah,
masculine versus the feminine energies. So it feels like that's what you're talking about, is that there's a particular kind of an understanding about masculine that a man has before becoming a dad, and that
yeah,
there's a different relationship with the masculine after.
right,
Do you experience have you experienced that? And like what do you think that becoming a dad has taught you about the masculine?
right. It's instinctual, right? Is man, I love it when he falls down and he bleeds. Like I want to celebrate it, right? Like, you know, yeah, totally. It's really about this push. It's I think that's one of the main difference, and it's really a different instinct for my wife Brienne,
hmm
right? She's wanting to like console and cuddle, right? In a certain sense, which
Right,
that is totally needed,
right,
right?
right.
However, I noticed I feel very. I'm like, oh, good, right? He's like, that was a good. And I'm like, I pointed. I was like, congratulations, that's the trophy right
Yeah.
there.
Oh my
Yeah,
God. Yeah, and that balancing against that super nurturing, just loving, make sure you're safe at all costs. Like,
yeah,
the goofy like caricature of a dumbass dad who's like the kid hurts
yeah,
himself and you're like, just rub some
yeah,
dirt on it. I
yeah,
went, like especially with Leo,
yeah.
Livia too, but
Yeah.
just like I noticed how much, Tammy had that whole feminine caring for side covered. And I was kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I guess I don't really need to do anything here. It's all fine.
Yeah.
Or how much fun it would be to play with the other side of it. And I literally, like, I just started saying it as a joke, like rub dirt in it. But then, like, it
Yeah.
eventually became like, just fucking rub some dirt in it. Like, it's fine. Like that, just something. And I don't even know
Yeah.
what that means to rub dirt in it, but it's so
Yeah.
fun to say.
There's this pushing, right? Like move towards the thing that's difficult and want it, right? That and nurturing it. And like, so right now with Teague, it's all about wrestling, which
hmm
I love. And I think a lot of this has to do with, as they get older, right? At some point with the boys, you start to feel there's like an aggression that they start to have.
hmm
And I think that aggression is so awesome, right? But it does need to be socialized, right? And if you beat it out of him, right? Like basically he'll never be respected, right? I think people who have integrated, right, their like hypothalamus, like go conquer the world, like
hmm
all that kind of testosterone energy, if they've integrated and been socialized in a good way with it, I think that what that happens is it endows you with a lot of respect, right, from other people. It's
Yeah.
like it's because you can kind of feel it because it's if I'm in conversation with you, at some part of me knows, right? Like at the end of the day, if we cross some line, you'd go ape shit, right? Like
hmm
I
hmm
think we do that instinctively. And when I don't feel that sense, especially with a man, I notice I don't respect him,
Interesting.
right? Um, and I think that there's, in this, I guess the technical term is like rough and tumble play,
hmm
right? It's almost my relationship with T right now. Now it's starting. The aggression's starting to come out, which I'm loving. It's not
Hmm.
totally out yet, right? So a lot of our interactions are me tickling him, like fucking with him, like, and he like literally needs to be thrown around. He needs to be flipped over on the bed. He needs to like like there's something about testing limits, right? That pushing limits and knowing where they are that I think is really instinctive and it's very physical.
Hmm.
Um,
Was it that way with Forrest too?
oh,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, totally.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you and Milani split. How old was Forrest?
7, I think.
And then he went and lived away from you with
Yeah.
Milani and Aubrey and
Yeah.
Tessa, right? So
Yeah.
all women, and they were in Atlanta, is that right?
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
so
Atlanta.
very far away. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a like how is that in terms of all this that you're talking about, and one for you, and two, that aspect of raising Forrest in this way, like
Yeah.
what happened then, and how did that go, and
Yeah.
what did you learn out of all that?
Within that is probably the deepest regret in my life. I think about that a lot. And basically kind of what was happening at the time is, we split up at the same time. There was a split. There was also a kind of a breakup with a business partner, which basically meant I needed to start all over, right, in what I was doing. So my income wasn't the best, and she was having a hard time finding work, that made it affordable. And so she asked for me to sign these papers that allows her to leave the state, right? Like, because you can't leave the state without permission. And and she was going to where my mom was, right? And her husband John was a really good guy. I have a lot of trust for him, and I love my mom, right? Like, so there was a sense of just being there and around them would be fine and good and all that. And I was like in such a, I mean, I felt like I was in such kind of a like I was really like, that was a dark time of my life, right? And so I didn't feel super rooted or grounded or anything like that. So all that was, going on, and I gave permission and I signed the papers. And man, I actually wish I didn't do that. Like that, it's like I look back on that now and I'm like, no, like, no, he needs to be around his dad, right? That's like more important than any financial consideration, any of that kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's a big one for me. Like, I can, as I'm talking about it, I can kind of feel this sense of like there's like kind of tears in the back of my eyes. There's like a heaviness in my chest. And that really obviously changed our relationship deeply.
Hmm.
Um, and I would go out and visit him, and I still go out and visit him like on a pretty regular basis. And it's interesting because there is, though, at the same time, there's something about where moving from like our relationship being a daily kind of routine, and at that level, to a visit. I think that it's interesting because what that did afford, though, was when we would be together, he got like 100% of me,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Like, whereas normal life, like there's so many things on your mind and you're juggling all this and there's logistics and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, but like when I would go visit him, it was like just him and I,
Hmm.
right? And so that, I think, was uh there was something special about that. Like, I think there was really something special about that. Now,
Yeah.
he didn't get the daily, because I think a lot of parenting has to do with a deep kind of mimicry,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Attunement that happens at a silent level, right?
Hmm.
And so there wasn't that, but there was this kind of these intense I thou relationships. And Forrest Forrest is a trip. Like most of what we do is like have these deep philosophical, Forrest confessing all these strange thoughts that he has and like where that's headed and what he thinks about things and like when
Hmm.
we can do that for hours,
Yeah.
right? And that's a really really special connection that we have there. He wrote me on my birthday. I think it was last year. He said, and I think this really says it. It's like he says, Dad, you've given me the greatest gift of all. Like you've given me my perspective.
Hmm.
Your perspective grants how you see, how you listen, right? The way you listen, right? And
Forms your whole reality.
it forms your whole reality. Given my sensibility and I read a lot of philosophy and I have a YouTube channel talking to philosophers and there's a poetic there's a poetic reverent thing that calls me to those things, right? And there always has been, and relating about it has been so important to me. It's rare, right? But I really felt that got expressed right with
Hmm.
Forrest,
Hmm.
right? And he savored it, right? And he had an inclination on his own, right, to do that. And I think we've met and like have just bonded, right,
Hmm.
in a pretty profound way. Yeah. And so in some sense, I think that like visiting him and having periods of time I'd go there for like a week and then he would just move in like with me for a week and
Hmm.
then or a weekend or whatever it was. And I think that really did afford, a lot of this sense of perspective and engaging in dialogue and being in that place. I don't know if it would happen in the same way,
Yeah.
right?
It's an interesting, thing you're posing, which is, is what we impart upon our children, the little things that happen just sort of on an ongoing basis, or is it the intentional actions that you do inside of a shorter period of time? And I think the answer is probably both, and whatever you got, like we all get different bites at the apple, and make the most of whatever you have. Guy, I definitely want to do this again with you.
Okay,
There's so
let's
much
do
there's
it.
so
Yeah,
much
we just
more.
got started.
I know there's so much
We just
more.
got started.
Um,
Hmm.
one thing that I do like to have just finish up with is thinking about the who this is for, right? It's for you and me before we became dads.
Yeah,
Like I really
yeah,
do feel like the opportunity for men to be contemplating and thinking about these things prior to becoming a dad. One whole area that I want to talk to you about is the idea of legacy. Like men often, especially the older they get, start talking about legacy. And I'm
yeah,
like, to me, it's the fucking most narcissistic, egomaniacal bullshit. Like, how are people going to remember me? But like, you're not important. In the long run, you're going
yeah,
to be forgotten like everything else.
yeah,
You're going to become excrement. But
yeah,
I do feel like a legacy that dads can really take seriously is what we do to end generational trauma. And the ability to do that before you become a dad, not like clean it up, like, as you go, like you and I have done. But knowing that that we're speaking to people who have yet or are like brand new dads. Like what advice would you give to a brand new dad?
it's like my advice is do whatever it is that affords you to be that that wonder be the root of your parenting. Be there at the birth, like be with every part of it, right? Be and keep in mind not just and there's a lot of repetition. There's lots of like day in, day out and logistics and like, there's tons of that stuff. And through that, even in the repetitive stuff, at the same time, hold that there is like an extraordinary like cosmological event you're undergoing and seeing and participating with, right? You're looking at it, as far as we know, the only beings that can become conscious of being, right? Like, and we are midwifing that, right? Like, I would say, like, whatever it is that for you affords that wonder be the basis of being a father, do that. Yeah.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Guy.
Thank you, sir.
Love you, brother.
Awesome. Let's do it again.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Dad Manual Podcast. If you liked it, please leave us a rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you really liked it, please share it with a dad you love. I'm looking to grow a community of fathers who are ready to change the world, and I need your help to do that. And if you got questions or topics you want me to explore, email them to me at thedadmanual@gmail.com. I would love to answer your questions on our next episode. Until next time, I'm Tony Cooper, and this is the Dad Manual Podcast.